Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Georgia Recruiting Rumors versus Facts. I am Blaine Gilmer here with Jed May and Trent Smallwood once again on a Monday night to answer all the questions that loyal Vault members put in about Georgia football recruiting. And Jed and Trent, this show comes on the heels of a big victory for the University of Georgia over the then-ranked number 3 Clemson Tigers. And, Jed, Trent talked to some people and saw how many were there following social media. It looks like Georgia had around 50 or more prospects at that game. So, Trent, a lot to cover here tonight. But, right off the bat, out of that Clemson win and things that how Georgia used people, anything that stands out to you recruiting-wise from the Georgia-Clemson game?
I mean, I think you got to look at the defensive line. I mean, you look at Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, guys like that, what they've done, what they did in the game. You look at guys like Bear Alexander, Walter Nolan. I mean, that would be the first, phone call, text, whatever I would be making after a game like that, a display like that, holding Clemson to 2 rushing yards, 7 sacks. I mean, you would think any defensive line would want to join the party on that. So I think watch the D-line recruiting and see if there's a little momentum going from that.
Jed, certainly, a guy that you've followed pretty closely, Kayan Lee, he was there with 2 of maybe the most interesting characters in this entire recruiting class with the class of 22, that is, with CJ Madden and Kristen Miller. Just what's the energy you saw from the Cedar Grove guys there at the game? I mean, just, crazy stuff going on there. But, with the tweets and all that, what'd you see out of the Cedar Grove trio there?
And Kay and Lee, it's hard to do in a group that features Kristen Miller and CJ Madden. Kay and Lee almost look like the most excited out of the 3. The video, I'm not sure whose Instagram story it was on, but it's the 3 of them. They pan back to Kay and Lee behind him, just screaming at the top of his lungs.
Yeah.
So yeah, that trio, obviously three guys that are very much in play for UGA. 2 guys in the 22 class and Kay and Lee as in the 23 class, but they seem to be very much enjoying themselves. I'll say that.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say I was in the stadium. I was at Charlotte. At the game, Bank of America Stadium, saw guys like Ethan Nation and AJ Harris walking around. Actually, they were sitting in the Clemson section that was over there, right, not too far away from me. But there was a lot of talent, not only on the field as we saw with those 2 teams. I mean, just unbelievable defense being played by Georgia and Clemson out there, as you mentioned, Trent. How could defensive prospects not like what they saw out of Georgia? Well, I mean, it was the excitement and the atmosphere in there. Talked to guys like Sammy Brown, who's a 2024 player who lots of people think has kind of an inside track to Clemson, but he was just overly impressed with what he saw out of Georgia's linebacking core, because that's where he's going to play in the future, is at that linebacker position. And a lot of the guys, JoJo Stone, even in the 2024 class, was just very impressed as well. So he's an athlete that'll play on the offensive side, but that didn't even matter to him in that defensive game. He just loved the atmosphere and what happened with those 2 type of programs. And one thing I wanted to mention, guys, I think a lot of people don't give these prospects enough credit in terms of how educated they are by some of these mentors that they have and their parents and some coaches on the fact that it's week 1 of a college football season. They may not see everything that team has, but they're kind of planting seeds there. Trent, kind of talk about that. I mean, how much do you think maybe us sometimes covering recruiting and also fans who love to cover, follow recruiting can overanalyze what these kids think about one particular game?
Yeah, I mean, one game is not going to make or break, a decision for a recruit. Now, I think the momentum can kind of swing one way. A lot of people are talking about the Dogs right now. A lot of people are up about them, but I don't think this one game is going to alter decisions. But I do think the display that Georgia was able to put on the field it was important that they came out and played well, and and showed specific recruits, what they could join up and be. And I think like Bear Alexander, who was in the stadium for this game, and guys like that, it really hit home for those guys, especially when they're have a top two, they're down to two, and making a decision here in 3 or 4 months. I think this is a game that will be on the back of his mind for a while. But at the end of the day, he's going to make the best decision for himself. Now, like 2023, 2024 game, 24 kids, they won't. I mean, they might remember this game, this atmosphere in a couple of years, but it ain't going to make or break a decision.
No, absolutely not. I don't think so on that. Jed, one thing I thought was interesting, I tweeted out early on was, I tweeted out before the game, just seeing Brock Bowers warm up, how it looked like, the way that him and JT Daniels, even in warm-ups, were in sync and in rhythm. It looked like, okay, this could be a Brock Bowers showcase, and that's definitely what it turned out to be. Pierce Sperlin, Oscar Delp sitting in the stands together watching that. I mean, Jed, that had to – I know it's maybe not be a decision maker in terms of the performance of Brock Bowers, but that had to plant seeds in both of those minds, and also with Pierce Sperlin already be committed to Georgia. I mean, if you're a guy like Oscar Delp, you had to like what you saw, right, Jed?
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that we're having this conversation now, and the kind of joke for the past 3 or 4 years is, when's Georgia going to throw the ball to the tight end? When's Georgia going to throw the ball to the tight end? They come out in the biggest regular season game they've had in a while, and Brock Bowers gets I think 3 targets on that first drive, I think, in his first collegiate game. So, yeah, Oscar Delp and Pierce Sperlin, I think they were sitting together at least for a part of that game. And it's hard not to imagine Pierce is telling Oscar, yeah, that could be you next year. In the first game, I think Georgia opens up with Oregon next year. That's the Chick-fil-A kickoff game next year. And it's hard to not imagine that was sort of Pierce's recruiting pitch. Look, that could be you next year. This could be you in the Georgia. And let's not forget, the targets John Fitzpatrick got, that Brock Bowers got. Darnell Washington's not even playing. How many targets could he have gotten last night if he'd been fully healthy? So the usage of the tight end is certainly on the upswing with the talent they've got in that room, and that's only good things for Georgia on the recruiting trail.
No doubt. And Todd Hartley was very proud of the tight end performance, tweeting out hashtag tight end tough when he was celebrating the Georgia victory. So definitely a lot for them to have in their arsenal in terms of the Georgia coaching staff now that they're able to go out to high school games and things like that and visit people to talk about stuff. And before we get to our questions here, I did want to touch on some of those guys that came to the game in terms of like a Michael Daugherty. Jed, you covered him. You'll have something probably coming out on him on UGAsports.com soon. A very versatile athlete, a guy who is able to do a lot of things on the field. But, he told me, he said, hey, I kind of had a feeling that Georgia's defense was gonna rise to the occasion, and boy, did they. Just talk to people about Michael Daugherty and how special of a prospect he is after seeing him in their 42-6 victory over Alpharetta last week at Grayson.
Yeah, I've never seen, and obviously I haven't been doing this very long, but he just, you watch him play and he screams future star. As he started the game, he lined up on the outside of boundary corner. He moved inside of the slot. He lined up at linebacker. He had a really impressive play where he sort of, and it's hard to tell if he lined up at linebacker or just came down, but he blew right through a tackle and got a sack. He plays all over the field for that defense. And he told me after the game, I asked him, do you have a position that you prefer? And he just said, I play football. If it's linebacker, if it's safety, if it's outside corner, whatever it is, that's where I want to play. And he excelled all over the place. He's one of those guys that, it kind of reminded me of Caleb Downs, honestly, a little bit, watching him just as a guy that plays safety, but is always around the ball. I think I had him at 8 or 9 tackles, unofficially. And he was all over the place from a variety of positions, and a guy that, I really expect Georgia to be in on hard going into that 2023 class.
Trent, you've talked about it before. Grayson has not been a high school that has been very fruitful for Georgia in terms of targeting and recruiting and things like that. We talked about Griffin Scroggs and him being committed now to the University of Georgia out of Grayson High School, how that looms large, and, he could end up impacting some of his teammates there and being a positive, recruiting force for Georgia. But I want you to touch on it again. Georgia's already been in the upper echelon of recruiting, but if they're able to start reaching into Grayson, potentially to Buford, to some of these untapped areas in the state of Georgia that they've not been able to get to. I mean, that recruiting could even perennially go up at that number one slot almost all the time. I mean, is that how big of a difference those kind of guys could end up making?
I mean, no doubt. I mean, you got like Owen Popo is at Auburn, Wanye Morris at Tennessee. Now he's at Oklahoma. I mean, you got kids that have gone all different places, and a lot of these kids, didn't necessarily grow up in Georgia. But if you can get like I said, if you can land one or two kids from there, like they already got Griffin, you land a Dartery kid. You can start seeing that take off. And I mean, yeah, it would make life a whole lot easier when you're missing on some of these key in-state guys. And I mean, Grayson's had their fair share of 4- and 5-star guys come out. So if you can start hitting on them prospects, then I mean, that would be a outstanding kind of school to get into. So you mentioned Buford too, and then Buford, Grayson, getting into Gwinnett County schools. Just overall, I think if
Cedar Grove.
Yeah, if Georgia can start landing these kids, it would make in-state recruiting a whole lot easier and get them from going to Clemson. And I think that's one big reason to get the momentum kind of back on Georgia's side with some of these recruits, because a lot of these kids are going to Clemson, not necessarily from Grayson, but just Georgia kids in general.
Well, Clemson, it definitely does have a inside track at Grayson through the Mickey Kahn connection there, former head coach at Grayson now. I believe he's an analyst there right now, currently defensive analyst. So Mickey Kahn, definitely a lot of roots there with the Clemson connection. But before we get to our questions and things like that, guys, I just wanted to say, in terms of Georgia, and the only reason this game may be a little bit different, I know we've said and we've made clear, single games are not going to make or break a commit's, process in terms, or a prospect's mind in terms of, okay, I'm going to this school or that school. But when you have something that is such an anomaly that we saw on Saturday night, and how dominant Georgia's defense was, and you mentioned it, Trent, 2 rushing yards given up. 7 sacks. The DBs, who were much maligned coming into this game for Georgia, were plastered to those receivers, those athletic receivers for Clemson. There was hardly any room at all. The biggest fault you can find with Georgia's defense is that they were maybe too aggressive. The pass interference. Keith Ringo tackling the guy in the end zone down there was, some of those egregious pass interference calls. But other than that, guys like a Caleb Downs, guys like a Michael Daugherty back there in the secondary, on top of what the players like Christian Miller and CJ Madden, who will end up being an edge guy, Michael Williams, there was probably a lot of eyes tuned into that game, and had to just plant that seed of, man, I've never probably seen a defense as dominant as that in a big game. So I think that one may be a little bit different. I don't think any of us expected that, Trent. When we've been talking about that for a couple of months now, in terms of how will the Clemson game impact, I think all of us, and be fair to say, were thinking this would be a game and where the winner would have to score 30-something points to win the game.
And I think that's going back off. If you look at Clemson the past, 5, 6, 7 years, that one thing they're going to do is they're going to put up points. One thing they're going to do is they're going to have good quarterback play. And majority of the time, they're going to be able to run the ball. And it just didn't work out for them this past Saturday. And I think recruits watch these games. Recruits were watching the playoffs last year. Recruits watching the playoffs the year before. Recruits watching the playoffs when Clemson's won the national championship, been on the big stage, and they've seen them have success on offense. And just to see Georgia come out and totally dominate, I know that opened some eyes to some guys.
I'll be honest with you, Jed. I think probably the thing that was bigger than even the performances, when you got Quavo, partying in the locker room with you after the game, that has a bigger impact. You've been around the guys, you've been around the kids. That kind of stuff has as big impact as anything, does it not? When they see Quavo and others over there, Thomas Davis, a former NFL player there, rocked up with his Georgia basketball jersey on the sideline. So that kind of stuff has a big influence on these guys.
Yeah, for sure. It's it's a little bit like Trent said earlier. One game it's not what makes or breaks these kids. It's relationships, it's experiences, it's all that kind of stuff. So when you're a recruit and you're seeing guys you're seeing the whole team party with a rapper that I guaranteed that all these kids listen to. It that makes an impression on you. It's one of those things, especially like Trent said earlier, those 23 and 24 kids that might remember this game a couple years down the line. They're going to remember that too. They're going to remember seeing the whole team partying with Quavo in the locker room, and and whatever videos of Kirby come out later of him trying to rap, and God forbid those videos come out. But that's the kind of stuff that makes impressions on kids, even more so than it's like. Let's take Kane Lee, for example, since we talked to him. I asked him last year, what do you remember from that Georgia Clemson game? I remember the atmosphere, and he'll remember seeing that stuff on Instagram too. So that's like you said, that's going to be a huge thing for a lot of these kids, I'm sure.
No doubt. And one thing we like to do here, last thing before we get to our questions, we like to do a Fall in the Future piece, which I've got that done today. It should be out maybe either, if not today, tonight, sometime tomorrow, is being able to follow how these recruits are doing. Branson Robinson was in a game against the Lake Charles Prep, and he ended up having 20 carries for only 61 yards, but 3 touchdowns on the game. So he made the most out of those 20 carries, scoring 3 touchdowns. Michael Daugherty, when you covered, Jed, he had 9 tackles in that game, a couple tackles for a loss. So he was flying all over the field. But Sammy Brown, Sammy Brown is someone that Georgia is going to prioritize. I know everybody's saying, oh, well, he's probably going to be – I don't know why everybody's going to go ahead and say that he's a foregone Clemson guy, because Dan Lanning and Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart will be all – plus Malachi Starks is making the connection with him. They will be all over Sammy Brown. Trent, Sammy Brown he returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown in Jefferson's win over Southside from South Carolina this past week. He then rushed a touchdown in, and then also he recovered a fumble on defense and returned it for a touchdown, all in the first quarter. So Sammy Brown, we've talked about it before, but Trent, just the athleticism and the speed combination at that size, he's going to be a superstar for years to come. Oh,
no doubt. And he's another guy that you would just love to see. I'm sure Georgia would love to see in that scheme that they're running. You just watched the linebacker play the other night. You just watched Nakobe Dean and all those guys flying around, and that's another guy that could come in. And I know that he could see himself flying around in that defense, similar to what they were doing. And I think just the way they were blitzing those guys, and I think that had to stand out to him.
Just for reference, Sammy Brown right now is the same size and every bit as fast as Nakobe Dean is. I mean, right now as a sophomore in high school. I mean, he's
same size as weight.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting close. He's what, he's 230, 235.
But he's got to be taller.
He's 6'3". Yeah, he's taller, but I mean, in terms of his weight, he's already there. So Sammy Brown's a big target as well. Dylan Bell, last one there, guys. He had a electrifying kickoff return for a touchdown, and also he rushed it in. They use him as a Wildcat quarterback a lot at Kincaid. So Dylan Bell had a successful night there. A guy that I really think you're going to see jump up those charts as time goes on. So we're ready with that. We've touched on Fall in the Future. We've talked the impact of the Clemson game, some guys that we saw there and what they saw out of that game. Are we ready to take questions?
Let's roll.
All right. So I'll let them roll across the bottom and I'll read them out to you guys. Mark Dog 1 says, how did the game affect Georgia's positioning with Andre Greene, if at all? Well, it was a 10-3 ball game. That is not something probably that is going to excite receivers. I'll kind of slip this in there. Shaz Preston dropped his top 4 today: Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and LSU. And I talked to Shaz Preston's father, Sean Preston, and he said they were sitting in Mississippi State's stadium watching his brother who plays for Mississippi State play Louisiana Tech, and they saw the score going on there, and they just kind of looked at each other and said, man, when it's a big game, Georgia's going to rely on that defense. Not in a bad way, but they're just saying Georgia's got that defense to rely on. So I don't know that this game did anything to move the needle with an Andre Greene. I mean, Trent, what's your thoughts on that?
No, I don't think you're going to see the full potential of this Georgia wide receiver core until you get some guys back and start opening it up a little bit. But I don't think this game in particular was something that wide receivers are just going to draw over, because I mean Georgia passed for 100 50 yards, and Clemson probably passed for 160. So I don't think this is a game that's going to turn heads for wide receiver recruits, but I think that could happen down the line as Georgia it gets more gets some of their guys back, and the passing game starts to push forward a little bit.
And Jed, Andre Greene didn't have a lot to be excited about this weekend at all, because the three schools that he was kind of really seen to be the most excited about throughout his recruiting process, Georgia, Clemson, and Penn State. None of them. Penn State put up the most points of the week out of those three with 16 in an absolute rock fight against Wisconsin up there at Camp Randall, coming away with the victory, however. But, if anything, some of that maybe Andre Greene, his excitement about Clemson diminishes a little bit with the absolute train wreck they had of an offense. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. He wasn't just watching Georgia's passing game. He was watching Clemson's as well. I think one of our rivals analysts posted a quote to our message board basically saying basically all he said was he thought it'd be a higher scoring game on both sides. So it's like I said, I don't think this is a game that is definitely going to move the needle in a positive way. I don't think it'll move much in a negative way either, just because, it's a first game on Georgia's side. Obviously there's injuries on the Clemson side, how much of the passing game can be chalked up to, DJ Uiagalelei running for his life all night. So I don't think I don't think it hurts Georgia. I'll say that. And I don't necessarily know that it really helped Clemson. I think it's, if anything, it's probably a whatever you call it, net neutral from going into the night.
Yeah. A program I would think that maybe some receivers got excited about too, and being honest, is Texas A&M. I know Haynes King had some inconsistencies and threw some picks, but that's an exciting offense in terms of Anais Smith and Isaiah Spiller, what they were able to do with those guys versatility wise. And then they've got Chapman running deep. They were letting it loose. I mean, Haynes King didn't connect on some of those deep balls, but Jimbo was taking shots over there as they beat Kent State 41-10. So that's another program that Andre Greene Jr. is interested in. But this is all going to come down to these official visits and things like that for Andre. He will take one to Georgia. I feel almost sure about that he'll be in Athens for an official visit at this point. All right, question number 2 from Will Stockdale. UGA seems to be in the hunt for most on the wish list, but way more than we have spots for at wide receiver, DL, and DB. How many of each do we take, and how specifically do you see it shaking out? Trent, they're at 16 commits right now. That could, 16 give or take, depending on how this roster is kind of massaged and these scholarship opportunities are handled, because let's face it, not everybody that is committed ends up being a scholarship guy. That changes and is fluid. But I would say right now, if you want to take it on face value, you're looking at 9 spots left. So Trent, if you had to give your best guess, how do those 9 spots break out going forward in terms of by position, by numbers?
I might say you take a wide receiver, a tight end, maybe
seven left after that.
Maybe an offensive tackle if you can get the right one. I don't know. I mean, offensive lineman. I know they're looking at Ernest Greene and a couple of big guys, but that offensive line will be to be determined. I think you'll take 2 defensive linemen, 2 maybe 3 defensive backs, and then
an edge guy.
And then edge guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they, like you said, that offensive lineman is not guaranteed in this class. I think they could end up just taking the 2, Griffin and Jacob Hood, because if they get the right 2 edge guys, so let's say, everybody here, I believe, has a future cast in for CJ Madden to Georgia, feel pretty good about him ending up at the University of Georgia. He's going to be an edge guy. Then you've got, can they get back in the good graces with an I White? Shamar Stewart is very high on Georgia and will be, taking an official visit this fall. Georgia's angling for his last visit. So if they could get a pair there, and I agree, as many as possibly 3 defensive backs. If you can get Kamari Wilson on board, if you can get Jaheim Singletary, which, Jed, you've talked to him recently. He's very high on Georgia, on Will Muschamp, on Kirby Smart, on Dan Lanning, all of it. And then Julian Humphrey is sitting out there as well. Haven't been able to get with Julian yet on his reaction from the Georgia Clemson game, but as soon as I do, that'll be over on the vault and talk to those guys. But I think if you get 3 DBs, 2 edge guys, so that's 5 out of the 9, a tight end, a receiver, that's 7, and then you got 2 more spots to kind of play with there and see if you can do different things. But Jed, specifically on the defensive backs, everybody feels good about Kamari Wilson. I believe right now with Georgia that, he was really digging what he saw, his reactions publicly on Twitter during the Georgia Clemson game. But Jaheim Singletary, that's the big one out there, number 1 ranked corner. You talked to him recently in terms of being down there and seeing him. That the way that Georgia played coverage, Darren Kendrick, Keely Ringo, those kind of guys out there, that had to make an impact on him in that Clemson performance. Absolutely.
And I've tried to get in touch with him, haven't gotten him yet. I'll keep working on that. But it seems like Georgia's trending. I wouldn't say they're the leader right now, but definitely trending positively. Just for a couple reasons. Obviously, he came on that visit to Athens. He loved it. Loved Kirby. Loves Will Muschamp. Had a great visit. I talked to some people down there when I went to watch him play. Said he really wants to play in the SEC, which obviously Miami, another strong contender, is not in the SEC, and they also got smacked by a team that is in the SEC this weekend. So
defense is a mess too.
Yeah,
he may see Miami though and say, "Hey, I could play all 5 of their DB spots right now and couldn't do any worse than what." And that was awful.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. It kind of seems like there's a couple different factors that are playing into Georgia trending positively for him right now. And it's like we talked about this before, they might take 2 defensive backs, or, they'll make the room if it's Singletary, Humphrey, and Wilson all want to commit. They'll make the numbers work, however that needs to shake out. So, but yeah, he's kind of the biggest domino kind of standing out there in the secondary class right now.
Yeah, let's just call it what it is. If Georgia were to land Kamari Wilson, I think it's the best safety in this entire class, and then Jaheim Singletary, with already the defense that you're seeing putting out there by young guys, that Georgia defense. I mean, you talk about it just to the victor go the spoils and the rich get richer. I mean, that's what that would be if they're able to do that. Realistic UGA fan 1191 version 2.0. Love that name there on the vault. What should we expect on offense versus UAB? Pound the rock, or will we try to get aerial attack going? Any concerns with this matchup as a trap or letdown game? All I'm going to say is this: UAB is not someone to be taken lightly in terms of they're going to be very well coached. Bill Clark is a tremendous football coach. UAB, since that program went under, Bill Clark was the coach. It no longer existed. They brought it back. They've really invested in the program since it has come back, and they've got a quarterback who's experienced. He's a senior in Tyler Johnston, and is going to really, really, do well in terms of how he distributes the ball. They came off 31-0 win over Jacksonville State. So, yeah, I mean, there could be, if Georgia doesn't come with just the same intensity that they did against Clemson, there could be a little bit of a letdown. But offensively, and this is more for kind of Paul and Ben's show on Sundays, things like that. But offensively, Trent, I mean, what do you think? Is it really going to be more of the same until they start to get some of these weapons back?
No, I think they'll try to stretch the field a little bit. I think they were just trying to keep drives alive against Clemson, and that's what they did, and they were successful. You look at time of possession and stuff like that against Clemson, and Clemson only had the ball, it seemed like, for I think they said 7 plays in the first quarter against Georgia, and that's exactly what Georgia wanted to do. I mean, they didn't put any points on the scoreboard, but they were able to keep the defense off the field, which showed in the second half. They were still flying around just like they were in the first half, and it was able to sustain some drives. And I think you'll see Georgia try to develop more of a vertical passing game, try to get Burton, try to go downfield a little bit more, take some more risk. I don't think and we had mentioned this before, Georgia did not want to make that mistake that Clemson made that ultimately won the game for Georgia. And I think you'll see a little bit more risk taken next Saturday.
Well, another thing you're going to see is UAB is not as big in terms of stature on their front. So Georgia, in my opinion, will have some more explosive runs. And what that will cause is that'll cause UAB to bring a safety down in the box. And when that does, there come your shots with an Arian Smith, with a Jermaine Burton. So, Clemson was able to handle the running game with 5.5, 6 in the box and be able to have safeties come down. And then also they were playing cover 3 a lot, some loose zone and being able to take away the deep threats right off the bat. So I don't think UAB would be able to play Georgia like that because of the caliber of defender out there.
I didn't realize it. Another thing, I didn't realize it until Dabo said it, and I went back and watched the game that they were dropping 8 in coverage. I mean, that makes life, especially when you're low on depth at wide receiver, it makes life hard for a quarterback.
Yeah, no doubt. Jed, I'm gonna let you handle this one. ASU Dog has been hitting us with this for the last couple of weeks. I'm gonna go ahead and put it out there. I love to be transparent on this show. I do not know a lot about Horace Lockett from Westlake, but Jed, tell us everything you've kind of figured out here with our sister site, the Georgia Tech board over there on Rivals.
I too do not know a lot about Horace Lockett from Westlake until about, let's see, what time is it? Till about 45 minutes ago. He's a big guy. I was honestly a little surprised at how big he was. He's listed at 6'6", 325 on his Rivals profile card. Committed to Georgia Tech late in July. I read an article from our Jackets Online site, and they said basically he were publicly committed on July 25th. He'd been silently committed for a while before that. And, at that time, he told our Georgia Tech writer he wasn't really thinking about any more visits. He was kind of locked into Georgia Tech, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, last weekend did not go well for Georgia Tech. So, I don't know. I mean, stranger things have happened.
They've already flipped one from Tech, but in terms of Griffin Scroggs, but I'm not sure that Horace Lockett is a guy. I mean, you're talking about with Walter Nolan and even trying to get back in with Travis Shaw, Kristen Miller's out there, Shone Washington. There's a lot of guys that I think are higher in the pecking order, but ASU Dog, we definitely wanted to answer the question, and thank you for submitting it. What's up, Dog? He put hypothetical future cast: Nolan, Shaw, Burden, Evan Stewart, Alexander. He said, he also said, and I didn't have room to put it on here, but he said, are your thoughts of signing us one? What are your thoughts of Georgia signing one or more of them? And he asked about the defensive performance from Clemson impact. And, in terms of if we were going to put hypothetical future cast in, I would put a hypothetical future cast in for Walter Nolan at this point anywhere in the top 3, which is A&M or Tennessee, but Georgia. I just don't see him at Georgia right now. Now, did that change with the Clemson thing? Maybe so, but you got guys that they're in there with like a Kristen Miller. Bear Alexander, I think, is much more close to that line of falling back into the fold with Georgia than a Walter Nolan. Travis Shaw, I mean, You've heard any rumblings on there of reaching out to Travis lately?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that Travis Shaw was reached out to after the game, and I would at this point right now I would be surprised if Georgia doesn't land one of those big defensive tackles, and maybe a Christian Miller to go with him. But I mean, as far as which one, I think Bear Alexander would be the most likely at this point right now. Travis Shaw just recently committed to North Carolina. North Carolina was a mess the other day. We'll see how that season goes, but I think Bear Alexander would be the obvious choice at this point. But I mean, I'm not gonna eliminate Nolan or Shaw. I think Georgia's going to keep pushing there, and I think they're in the top 3 for Nolan. They were in the top 3 for Shaw before that went to, and it would be Clemson and Georgia, the other 2 teams for Shaw. So I do think Georgia's going to land one of them, but we'll just wait and see as the season progresses to see which guys get on campus and what happens with Shaw. But I would. Bear Alexander would be the one that I would probably, if I had to put a future cast in, I'd probably put it on him.
Yeah, and as far as Evan Stewart, that's just not going to happen, and you can leave that one alone. Luther Burden, Georgia's definitely in it. Missouri, They didn't look great against the Central Michigan. He was there on hand for that one, I believe. Luther went to that game. So you got to wonder, what he's thinking about that. And then he'll be down in Georgia for a game later on this year. He's coming for an official, Luther is. So Georgia and Missouri, kind of the top two right there, with him having decommitted from Oklahoma. And let's be honest, it's not looking good for Oklahoma. If you're going by week 1 performance, Oklahoma almost lost at home in a game. They were trying to be nice to Tulane, and Tulane almost took their generosity and shoved it, right up their tails over there with a 40-35, barely escaping. But Luther Burden is absolutely electric. He's a guy that I know Georgia's going to put all the chips in the middle for over there to try to bring in this class. And whether it's Luther Burden or, a guy maybe they can go out and try to flip somebody later on the year if they get this offense rolling, I think that will be good for Luther Burden to see. But it's all about relationships. And another guy, Shaz Preston, I think right now Shaz Preston and Luther Burden are your two most serious candidates in terms of a elite receiver that you could add. A lot of people like to dismiss Shaz Preston just because he's from the state of Louisiana. Like I said, Shaz Preston is very strongly considering the University of Georgia. I would put Texas and Georgia kind of on that same threshold with him right now. And there's a lot to see. His dad told me today that they're working their schedule to try to get out here for a Georgia game, but they're trying to see as many of his brother's games this fall with him being at Mississippi State as possible, with it being Shaz's last fall without being a college athlete himself. So they're trying to enjoy that as a family, but he'll try to get out there, and that would be huge for this class. And then last one we have from Dog Bite You. Jed, I'll let you fill this one. Williams, Singletary, and Humphrey. Who jumps to us first? They had to love what they saw Saturday night. So, Jed, if you're a lot of hypotheticals here, but if you're rolling the dice, Williams, and I guess he's talking about Michael Williams there, unless you meant to type Kamari Wilson because they're all DBs. But Williams, Singletary, and Humphrey. I think let's go with he meant to maybe type Wilson there. So Wilson, Singletary, or Humphrey, which one do you think commits to the University of Georgia first, if any of them?
Definitely not Humphrey. I mean, not to say that Georgia's completely off the list. I just that momentum that might have been there, after he came to Athens. I know he came late in July. It's not to say Georgia's off the table for him. It seems to have cooled a little bit, just at the point where he's not on flip watch every single day. So between Wilson and Singletary. I don't think Singletary will commit. Oh, what'd you say, Trent?
Kamari Wilson.
Yeah. Kamari Wilson. Yeah.
I would definitely say Kamari.
I was going to say the same thing just because I know Singletary. Yeah. I was going to say Singletary's not going to – I don't think he would come – he would do it until he comes up here for a game. So I would say Kamari Wilson too.
Yeah, Kamari Wilson, his family, we reported here on over on UGAsports.com that Kamari Wilson and his family, they bought – several $100s worth of Georgia gear and things like that. I don't know if they're doing that when they're going to all these visits and stuff, but they were in a store stocking up on Georgia stuff. So that would probably be a good sign. And you can get that kind of information if you go and become a member of the Vault. You can get, that's a couple weeks old now. So you can get all that kind of stuff if you're a member of UGAsports.com on the Vault. But guys, that's, we kind of hit it right here. That's all the questions that I had from people on the Vault. I'll look over here on YouTube real quick. If anybody had some talk about Dan Jackson from where Trent and I are from, Gainesville, Georgia. Trent, before we get off of the broadcast here, Dan Jackson, man, you talk about recruiting. Georgia's very selective in their preferred walk-ons as well, and Dan Jackson is a perfect example as to why.
Oh yeah, and Kirby's raved about the kid, and he's he had a good spring too. He had a good spring game, and his hard work and everything just kind of paid off with Tyke Smith missing that opener. It kind of, I thought when Georgia went to a dime package, they might bring an extra cornerback, but they didn't. They brought in Dan, and he kind of rolled, I guess, Scene down, and it was interesting to see. And I thought he played well. I thought he played well on the back end, but I think that is another thing that Georgia's looking for, to add that safety depth. And I think that I don't know who the fourth safety is, because I don't know who's behind Dan Jackson, but I thought he played well, and it was nice to see. Dan's dad's my dentist, so it's pretty neat to see him out in the field.
There we go. Dan Jackson definitely is kind of earned his way onto the field there, and of course Georgia does have some depth issues there at safety, but Dan nonetheless has earned that playing time. And that tying it back into recruiting before we go, Julian Humphrey, they're actually talking to him about they could see him playing safety, not just corner as well. So there's the possibilities never end. But guys, that is going to do it here on this Monday edition of the Georgia Recruiting Rumors versus Facts. Make sure to follow along on Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe over there. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button for us before you get out of here if you hadn't done so already. Turn on notifications. So much content coming your way now that we're in the Georgia football season. And Trent, Jed, we'll catch everybody next time on Rumors versus Facts.